So probably the most common early warning sign that we come across has got to be HMRC arrears. I can't think of many companies that come to us that haven't got HMRC on their creditors list. And most of the time, the pressure from HMRC is the main driver why they would want to pick the phone up and speak to us. So the question really is, why is that? Why are HMRC such a prevalent problem? Why do these arrears build up? Why do debts mount up with HMRC? Well, they're a forced creditor for starters, so it's not as police to say if you go and get a supplier account with somebody and they will run through how much you can borrow and they will ring you up every week or month to check that your limits are correct and how you're going to pay. They are a forced creditor. And interestingly, you only pay HMRC sometimes every year, every quarter. PAYE is a little bit differently, and they've introduced RTI, real-time PAYE payments now. So people actually get far less in bother with PAYE now as they used to because of these measures of monitoring it. So it's clearly down to this timing. VAT traditionally every quarter, corporation tax every year. So what happens there is that as the business is trading, they're not putting sufficient monies aside for HMRC. And when the bill comes each year, that bill is also very large. They're disproportionately much larger than any other bill usually, especially corporation tax if you've had a good year. So when these bills come in, they're quite a shock. Really, a good tip here is as you are trading, you should have a deposit account. So every time money comes in theory, 20% if you're VAT registered, should go across into this separate account. Okay, if you've got inputs to set off against it, that's not going to be the full 20%. But even so, to get this idea that we've got this pot, this slush of money that's sat to one side, and if we get in the mindset that that is not our money, it's somebody else's, if we can't live without touching that, that is an early warning sign. What we're effectively doing is using HMRC as a bank. And that can become a problem because HMRC are pretty strict and they have powers, they have rules, they have laws, which mean that they can come in and really take control of the business. They could, in worst case scenarios, they can force closure on a business. Not saying that that's going to happen immediately, but it is something that can happen. So by leaving yourself open like this, having very large bills owing to HMRC and not having the money there to pay for it, you are leaving yourself exposed. Normally, it's a smaller amount. You can look to negotiate payment plans with HMRC and such like. But coming back to it as being an early warning sign is that if you are constantly struggling paying these debts that have mounted up over a year, it's suggesting that you're having to use somebody else's money. You've got a loan. You're borrowing it from HMRC. So it's a really good indicator that the company, there's a problem somewhere within the business. It's not generating enough money. Its profit margins aren't big enough. So rather than just agreeing with people that, yeah, oh, I've got my VAT bill, it's a pain. You should know how much your VAT bill is really, and you should have money set aside for it. And if it isn't there, you need to put provisions in place. It might just be that you've never thought of that. There might be somebody watching this and going, that's a really good idea. Why don't I do that? So it could be as simple a fix as that. Just good housekeeping, good accounting. But it might be that it's indicative of a deeper problem. So by looking into that, it might be a good moment to spot we're not making enough money. Our margins are a bit off. So certainly that is probably the biggest early warning sign that we come across, and one which certainly shouldn't be ignored. Cash flow pressure. I can't think of a phone call or a meeting that I have with a director where cash flow isn't raised. I think it becomes a bit of a phrase that is lent upon. It's actually quite accepted that we've got cash flow problems, but it's really understanding what that means and why it's an early warning sign. Well, traditionally, cash flow is, as the name suggests, it's how much cash is available in a business at any one moment and the flow of that money. So traditionally, if you're having cash flow problems, it's really down to synchronizing monies coming into the company and monies going out of a company. So it could be that your payment terms are off. You've got money coming in from a customer, say 4 weeks time, but you've got to pay your suppliers every week. So clearly that's going to generate a cash flow problem. We've got to somehow bridge that gap. But it's not a serious one. Would I say that's an early warning sign? I would say it's an early warning sign to put a measure in place to synchronize those payments. Simply ask your customer if they can pay every week, or go and negotiate with the creditors, or is there some sort of finance that can be put in place to bridge that gap? So although it's an early warning sign, it is certainly one which can be met and overcome quite easily. Where we start seeing it as a more severe warning sign is when somebody is constantly having a cash flow problem. It doesn't actually mean that they've got a cash flow problem. There is something sat behind it, constantly creating this cash flow problem. And usually that is that spend is too big or receipts are too small. And so it's nothing to actually do with the timing of the money. It's to do with the business isn't generating enough to meet its payments. So when that happens, there needs to be really, rather than just a casual, I've got cash flow problems, maybe it isn't. We really need to look into that and understand why these cash flow problems are existing. And if it's that we're not charging the right prices, then we need to reevaluate that. If our costs are running too high, we need to restructure that in some way. So cash flow pressure is certainly another strong early warning sign, one that needs to be broken down. Just to overview again, is it simply synchronizing payments and receipts, or is it that there is a deeper problem with the business somewhere further down the line? Directors are coming under constant pressure from creditors. And this really is a really important one to look at. If you're finding that you're getting phone calls, letters, it's disruptive, it's indicative that the people that are your lifeblood of your business that are supplying you things aren't happy, usually because you've not paid them on time or you can't meet the payments. So creditor pressure is another strong early warning sign. And how might that look? As I've just said, it could be that they're chasing you for payments, or it could be that they're starting to ask for additional securities on the accounts, or it could be that they're reducing your payment terms or the amount that you can borrow or have in terms of credit from them. Where they ask for securities, it can be putting directors at risk. So if we are on this trajectory of things not going so well, all of a sudden we have this limited entity, but gradually the director is being asked to secure more of this debt. But also, if we take a business that comes to us that is under severe creditor pressure, those directors, those people that are steering this business, they're no longer doing what they do best. They're spending most of their day fighting this pressure, and it's really sort of toxic, and that can breed more problems and lower productivity. So a really strong early warning sign, another strong indicator is creditor pressure and how much influence they're having day to day. We've sort of touched on this in the first section, but using VAT and corporation tax reserves and PAYE money to survive is another early warning sign. So if we take, for example, we've got this prudent approach where we put money aside to pay VAT, or we pay our PAYE bill that week or month, or our corporation tax liability, but we find ourselves having to tap into it. It's really important to view that as it's not a good thing. I'm not saying never do it, because of course, if for whatever reason you absolutely had to, and you can see that money's going to come flowing back in and the money's available, it would be kind of crazy not to. But constantly having to take money out of your HMRC reserves, your pot, if you like, you've got to remember you are effectively taking out a loan there from yourself, and it's got to be paid back. And why is that a problem? The reason it's a problem is there's a phrase, once you've had your hand in the cookie jar, it then becomes sort of habit to do this, and the directors fall into this habit of constantly taking money out, and then it becomes a situation where actually there is nothing there. So not only we've got to pay all future PAYE and VAT and corporation tax liabilities, but we've now got this hole that we've dug, and that can be quite sizable. So without careful planning of how that is going to be paid back, and before you take it in the first place, just knee-jerk borrowing that money, that's got to be planned carefully to put that back to pay it. And it is an early warning sign, because if it isn't, then shots are going to be fired from HMRC. They're going to want this money back. They're not going to give you the time, or you can't just say, well, I needed to borrow it from myself. Can I? No, they're not necessarily going to be that sort of lenient as to why they're going to want their money on a certain day. So if you are borrowing money from this VAT pot, or it's simply not there, it is an early warning sign. It's one that you've got to think about now, because potentially in a month's time, or in a year's time, or 9 months' time, or whatever, you've got to have a robust plan in place. It's not there. How are we going to make it up? So it's really important to keep a track of how much your liabilities are, if possible. And I don't think enough people really do this. Today, where does your VAT liability sit? What's your PAYE liability going to be each month? Most people know that because it's kind of standard. But corporation tax, what are you going to likely owe in 3, 6, 8 months' time? Project it, forecast it, have the money there. Because if it isn't, again, and you're struggling to always make that up, it's certainly an early warning sign that there could be a problem somewhere. And the question again being, why am I needing this money? Why am I constantly needing to borrow the money? So it's a problem somewhere further up the chain that's causing this requirement to borrow and tap into your HMRC reserves. Declining margins, we're seeing a lot of this at the moment. And what does that mean? It means that our ability to make as much profit is getting much, much harder. Our opportunities to make the profit is getting much less. So it's hard at the moment anyway. But when businesses are probably suffering some form of early problem, the knee-jerk thing to do is to try and trade harder, pedal faster. The instinctive thing to do, apart from cutting marketing, which is a crazy thing to do, is that they will cut their prices to compete. So what happens there is the business becomes very busy all of a sudden. So people think, great, I fixed it. But actually, we're digging this hole even deeper, because when we get to a payment to be made, say VAT or HMRC, the amount they're going to be asking for is much, much bigger. What we're actually doing is we're not creating enough margin when we're selling to cover our costs. We are trading potentially or very close to making a loss, but it's hidden by this busyness. So we kick the problem down the road effectively, but it's damaging because by making yourself more busy, your bills are going to get bigger. So potentially this problem further down the line, if it were to come, this train has gained size and momentum. If it is going to hit, it's going to be much, much harder. That the crash is going to be much, much bigger. So it's imperative that to trade yourself out of a problem, there must be sufficient margins. If anything, it's screaming out for bigger margins at that time. It's ingenuity about how can we increase our margins, not how can we lower them in that moment. So it's another early warning sign. Is your business viable? Are you trading in a viable manner? Keep a check on it. Sounds simple, but it's often overlooked. And the final point to make about early warning signs is supplier pressure. And we've covered creditor pressure, but wanted to be a little bit more specific here about the supplier side. So creditors are all people that owe money in a business, but suppliers specifically are our ability to trade. When we start receiving pressure from them, and that might come in the form of wanting more securities, we've touched on that, or shortening our credit limits or the amount of time we've got to pay. What effectively we're seeing there is an early warning sign that our ability to trade is getting harder. We're becoming more vulnerable. So it isn't the end of days. It doesn't mean we're finished, but it certainly means that we've got to look at our relationships with our suppliers. What's happening here? Why aren't they happy? Is it because I'm not paying them on time? Can we structure something differently? Because without the supplier, most businesses are, their days are numbered pretty quickly if we choke that off. So it's important to look at that, look what we can do to bolster the relationship. Can we add more suppliers? We've got backup suppliers. But again, understand why they're not happy with us. It might be, and this is a common one, that we've suffered a dip in our credit profile. So again, work can be done on that. But certainly close relationships with suppliers, understanding that if we are getting pressure from them, ignoring them and not treating them like they are a key member of our team is a big mistake. So any sort of signs that they're not happy or they're putting greater demands on us really requires immediate action and remedying. It's certainly not the end of the world. Supplier relationships are something which are monitored and nurtured throughout time, but certainly problems, and it starts getting spiky and harder for us to get the equipment or material or whatever it is that we need to trade. When it starts causing problems there, then it really needs immediate attention. We down tools and we fix that before anything else. Here's one thing which I consider that could be done by directors to alleviate these problems, these early warning signs that we've been talking about today. So starting with HMRC arrears, one piece of advice: have a deposit account. Every time you transact, try and put a proportion money away and keep it aside, so when the bills come in, there is no shock. Cash flow pressures. So biggest piece of advice, and I think I've covered this in most videos I've done, is have a cash flow forecast. Live by it, run by it. If you're not sure what it means, ask, download, ring us. We can supply you with a cash flow forecast. It's very easy. live by a cash flow forecast, and you will not get any surprises. You will be able to deal with those early warning signs. Advice for creditor pressure: if you're getting lots of calls and phone calls, one piece of advice, hugely overlooked: don't ignore them. Pick the phone up, speak to them. That will buy you the time, that will give you the explanation, that won't spook them. Don't ignore creditor pressure. Using VAT and PAYE and corporation tax money, so effectively using HMRC's money that you've got in reserves to survive. One piece of advice there is, if you are doing that, there needs to be careful planning. You need to be able to use your cash flow forecast to say how you're going to replenish that. If you can't, then don't do it. So if declining margins are flashing on your radar, I would suggest sitting down and doing a full-scale review on every product or service that you're buying and selling to make sure that when you do transact, that the business is making sufficient money to be able to survive. And to help combat those early warning signs of supplier pressure, again, it's relationships. Your suppliers are part of your team. They're one of the most important things in your business, aside from your staff and these other assets that you've got that make money. So treat them like that. Have good relationships with them. Speak to them. Be open with them, because the last thing you want to do is for them to get spooked and stop supplying you those valuable materials and whatever else that they supply you with so that you can make money and trade. If you recognize several of these warning signs in your business, it's worth getting advice before the pressure escalates.